Hello and welcome to a live stream. My name is David Drapkin. It's a pleasure to be here with Guy Simon. We are in different parts of the world. We're talking around psychedelic topics, particularly relating to trauma, to psychedelic therapy, dissociation. And we will begin, Guy, by taking a few breaths together. It's really important. So everyone who's tuning in now or watching the replay, I welcome you to take a few inhales, a little bit more deep than usual, and a few exhales, a little bit more deep and full than usual, and letting a sense of being grounded just move through your body. All right, I feel better. Hey Guy, lovely to see you. How you doing today?
Doing good, basically doing good. I have a rough morning. There's a lot of renovation here in my new apartment, so morning was a bit intense, but thank you for the deep inhale and exhale.
Yeah. Yeah,
Lovely
we'll
to be
talk
here
more
too.
about the beauty of the body, somatic work, the breath. It's so important. First, I want to just ask you that question. Who are you today? What work do you do? And what really inspires you around your work as a psychedelic therapist at the moment?
First of all, a human being, just trying to make it in this world. Second, a partner for Alma, living in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, originally coming from Israel. I'm a psychotherapist and I'm a clinical director at Impulse and also sitting in the board of Safeheart, which are part of the subject of today. So Safeheart is a non-profit based in Israel, support the Nova Rave survivors through group work, private session of psychotherapy, and psychiatric counseling. Yeah.
Mm.
And also doing some psychedelic research.
Okay, yeah, we'll hear about that. Amazing. So we're here to talk maybe for 25 minutes. I think we're going to see each other in ICPR in the Netherlands in a couple of weeks. So we'll both be there. And you're going to talk about your presentation that you'll be giving on stage there. I think that the first thing to tell people about is the work that I'm doing at the moment. So I recently joined a company called Pink Elephant, and I'm going to announce it right now. The name of the education side to Pink Elephant that I'm head of is called Mirari. So we're here to talk about Mirari and the work we're doing at Pink Elephant. We're going to be at ICPR. And the important thing that is happening right now in the world is rapid questions being asked around how do we help ourselves as a collective species of human beings struggling with life as individuals, but also as a collective. So I definitely want to talk about what it's like doing group work, working in retreats, as well as doing individual psychotherapy. And the first question I want to ask, Guy, is there's been a very unfortunate experience in Israel, where I live, since October the 7th, but on October the 7th at the Nova Festival. And in a way, what happened there has given a unique opportunity to do psychedelic research on the survivors. I assume a lot of people will know the basics of what happened, but they might not know much about the research. So would it be okay just to start with, very briefly, what the research was trying to do and how it was hoping it could help people by delivering psychotherapy to some of those survivors of the Nova Festival massacre?
Yeah. So on October 7, a group of 8 people, I'm one of them, started to interact with each other, basically saying that the case of the Nova Rave survivors is not documented in scientific literature. So we don't know a lot about what's happening in the meaning-making process in the brain, in the physiology, in the psychology of a person that experiencing trauma under the influence of psychedelics. This is the research part. But it also influenced the clinical work that is much more important to take care of those individuals that will come from this event back into their life, the ones that survived, of course, and they will need support. What type and what kind of support? So it touches kind of the two papers that you wanted to discuss with me about. We gathered volunteers, around 400 mental health professionals, psychologists, social workers, art therapists, psychiatrists that helped voluntarily the Nova Rave survivors through individual talks. But also we started building retreats because we kind of understood that this is a collective, this is a tribe. Those people have strong connection to each other through being friends, but also sharing altered states of consciousness, right, at the time of the event, and of course the trauma. And we also know that one of the things that define this experience of being involved in a traumatic event is no one will understand what I experienced. But there are people that might will. Okay, so we want to connect them together so they can share. So this is what happened the week after. So there were a lot of gatherings of the people that were in the parties. We went there, we started talking with them, while we also offered through Safe Heart individual psychotherapy to the survivors. We basically understood that there need a literacy of altered states of consciousness when you work with those people. So you should be trauma informed and also psychedelic informed when you work with those individuals. And psychedelic informed is a lot of things, but basically is to understand, could be through reading papers, but could be also from personal experiences. What is the psychedelic experience? Okay, which is a question that nobody really answered till today, but we're trying. You should hold a non-judgmental, supportive, compassionate attitudes towards those individuals and not go fast into pathologization of the experience or the material that they share with you. So to be destabilized, I'm sorry for my English, under the influence of psychedelics is something that, for example, is very, very common. So people experience a lot of different phenomena, and you shouldn't jump into conclusions very, very fast. In order to not jump into conclusion, you need to understand the psychedelic experience. So we also started giving lectures and talk to the therapists that volunteer with us, that they will not jump into conclusion. And when they listen to the stories, they will listen in a, let's call it microphenomenological notion. So they should be very, very chill when they hear horrible, weird, complex stories. They're still processing those experiences because they had fragmentation in their memories. There is gaps also from the trauma, the adrenaline, but also from the psychedelic experience itself. Research. We wanted to understand the phenomenology of the experience. So my team did a qualitative phenomenological study with the Nova Rave survivors. We interviewed 45 individuals about their experience. So in-depth interviews and then analysis that was also thematic, but also phenomenological to really grasp what they experienced during the event, after the event, and with which assumption and paradigms they enter the event, because they knew kind of a lot about what the psychedelics can do. So they can also process the event with the past knowledge they had. So we need to be very, very delicate when we're analyzing the data that we gather for those individuals. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for that amazing work, Guy. I had just moved to Israel like 5 weeks before October the 7th. So I was here. I sometimes experience dissociation myself since I was a kid, but I know for the first couple of weeks I was not really there in my body, in my mind. Slowly, and I know there's still more healing work within me to do relating to that, but it's just, we're still living in war, and particularly even today or tomorrow, we're getting messages. So there's something about how do you heal when you're not safe, or when there's so much uncertainty around you, where in a sense, the destabilization is not resolved. And so you mentioned doing group work, retreat work. There's also nature therapy and equine therapy with horses. Some survivors went to Mexico, to the Netherlands to do psychedelic work there. There's a question, I don't know if you've got an answer to it. Psychedelics were part of the experience of the vast majority of survivors. To what extent could they, or have they been helpful as part of the solution, the healing journey of survivors as well?
Yeah.
Particularly considering the destabilization that surrounds us, but also the extent of it within them. Introducing a destabilizing factor like psychedelics, is that responsible? Is it safe? Is it helpful? Is it harmful?
The last question I asked those individuals were, did you use psychedelics post the event, and in which manner? What did you want to gain? Was it recreational or for the healing process? And I just started actually analyzing those questions a couple of weeks ago. I didn't touch those at all because it was like a side note for me. I wanted to be focused on the experience itself and the process in the recovery through psychotherapy, what was actually offered. But some of them decided that they want to go back to the experience. Some of them said, for example, as after you have a car accident or you fall from your bicycles, you need to get back on your bicycle. So they said, I want to keep using psychedelics, but now they're kind of attached to a very traumatic experience. I love those substances. I love the effect. I love the group gathering around them. It's part of my culture. Also, something to consider. This is part of the culture. You cannot just push someone's culture when you enter psychotherapy process. So yes, some of them used psychedelics in order to go back to the experience. Some of them use the psychedelics to go inward. Some of them use the psychedelics to have this oneness experience, again, in a safe environment, for example, a retreat,
Yeah.
or actually more trance festivals, right? Trance festivals are extremely important to those people. Well, it differs. Most of them said that they did use psychedelics. Most of them did it for recreational reasons. And the outcome was to be happy again, to have a good psychedelic experience, right? To just jump back onto your bicycles and keep on cycling. Some of them want to go deeper. And they mentioned that the setting of a trance festival was not a safe place for those experiences. And we know that from, I don't know, our experiences. A festival, a party is a very chaotic place, especially if you are trying to process your trauma. I think it can be a bit dangerous. Another thing is to have actual therapeutic process with those substances. And I don't have a lot of information about that because it started not long ago, officially, clinically approved by this or that organization. I cannot say. It's so subjective, David, you know. Some told me that they will never use psychedelics again. Some of them told me that they must use psychedelics in order to go back to their the place that they were before this traumatic event. I need to see data. I'm not sure, but I would. I will say that if they find this supportive and the right thing for them, period, the therapeutic psychedelic experience, it might have a beneficial effect because it's their paradigm. This is how they conceive their trauma and the healing process. So this is another thing of being psychedelically informed. Yeah, it's client oriented. So we should consider that, but also professionals should really do a proper intake and see if it's the right time for them to have an intensive and regressive experience. But it's also kind of the basic of exposure after trauma, right? We need to kind of go to the place that we were and not confront, but be close to it with someone that will support us. So.
Thank you. That was a very nuanced answer. I know there's a lot of depth and layers to that, and a lot of research that is happening still. And briefly, Guy, I know there's one of the research papers that's been discussed is around the differences in outcomes for survivors depending on what kind of psychedelic they were using or whether they were combining multiple psychedelics. If you don't mind, just what's kind of the key takeaways from that specific piece of research, and what does that mean for even like maybe the neuroprotective or the paraphylactic potential of certain psychedelics to reduce the probability or the extent of trauma from occurring after events such as these?
Yeah. I'm not a neuroscientist, but in my study, I asked them, do you think the psychedelic supported you during the event? And 75 said yes. When I asked them, it also supported you emotionally. Sorry, the first question was about the escape. As the substance intake was supportive, for the fact that you survived, 75 said yes. And if it had any emotional buffering from the horrors, they 85, around 85 yes, said yes. When I asked them if the fact that you took psychedelics while you were under the influence when you experienced the trauma was beneficial for you afterwards in the healing or recovering or integration process, it dropped to 50%, 40 to 50. So we truly understand that the healing process, the recovery from trauma is much more complex, okay? And it's the present situation. And people are trying to be very, very honest about what's going on in the present because they do want to recover. They don't need to sugarcoat things. They don't need to use their kind of pure assumptions because they truly experience a lot of pain. But when they're trying to do sense making, meaning making of what happened, and this is very important, you need to have a coherent story, a coherent narrative, a one that you feel okay with, that you can pass it through to a therapist, to a friend, to a journalist that is interviewing you, etc., etc. And for that, you need to, let's say, be an advocate to the things that you did and what happened to you in a supportive way because they survived. Yeah, we talk only to the one that survived, of course. There is the survivor bias. So in retrospective, and this is also part of the healing process of trauma, you need to build the proper story that you can carry with yourself because there is no linear healing from trauma. It's non-linear process. So you have flashbacks, you have triggering events in your life. You need to hold the complexity as much as you can. But you also need to achieve this post-traumatic growth. And this post-traumatic growth is based on your subjective story and what you're doing with this afterwards in the future. So present could be complex to hold, right? Future should be positive. So you should have a good future projection. You should see yourself doing the things that you love. You should see yourself taking your difficult experience and using it for good for others and for yourself. But the past can be altered, can be changed, can be whatever will help you feel good with it, with the story, right? Hope it was clear.
Yeah, I love especially the aspect of our stories that we kind of carry around within us and that we tell ourselves and we tell other people, particularly the story of our past, which can weigh us down, but also the story about our future. How meaningful is it? How much hope do we have? And from speaking to so many people around their use of psychedelics, it's the story of the past that has changed the narrative thread. They've kind of stepped into being the narrator a little bit more through understanding things differently. And often it's about more self-love and forgiveness, to be honest, as well as maybe forgiveness and acceptance towards others. And then the future. Oh, it's hard. It's sometimes hard with where we're at now, Guy, to have hope in the future. I'm laughing. It's a protective mechanism. I'm not really, it's not a funny thing, but gosh, the future is a heavy thing to think about. It really is. One quick point I want to make, your friend and colleague, Professor Roy Solomon, I think this week published research about the benefit of sleep for survivors of the Nova Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And how I think the first few weeks after the massacre, the people who reported better sleep or more hours of sleep, less disturbed sleep, had better long-term outcomes. Again, that could be neuroprotective, the brain kind of doing its own inner healing work, or who knows, circadian rhythm. But yeah, just a quick, any thoughts around that piece, around sleep and circadian rhythm?
Every study about recovering from traumatic event and to lower symptoms in PTSD points out to good night sleep. And if we can get a person to sleep well at night, wake up energetic, going to sleep early, not wake up for many, many hours, he will start getting better. So we always go back into that. So this is a very basic thing in PTSD recovery. Get the person to sleep proper at night. So reducing like intrusive thoughts, not being on your phone, getting support from your environment to go to sleep early, so not going out drinking beer or whatever. So it's a very basic thing we should do with the survivor, and this is why they were prescribed with sleep pills a lot. So it's before you treat depression and anxiety, you should get a person to sleep and exercise. So we always go back to that. And yeah, always people say that the most challenging times are at night when they're with themselves, right?
Yeah.
And thoughts are coming when the flashbacks are coming. So makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Beautiful. Sleep as medicine. We've got 5 minutes, so let's dive in to your talk in a couple of weeks at ICPR in Haarlem in the Netherlands, June the 4th to the 6th. So I'd love to see some of you there. I'll be there on behalf of Mirari, and Sophie and Max will be there with the rest of the Pink Elephant team. Guy will be there. Loads of people will be there. So we'd love to see as many people as possible. What's your talk about, Guy? And why is it that, in particular, this really resonates with you, that we need to talk about it and understand what its meaning is?
So I mentioned psychedelic-informed therapy in the beginning of our talk, and actually this term is not something that is coming from the work that we did with the Nova Rave survivors. It's coming from a study I started with a group of people called the Challenging Psychedelic Experience Project, led by Jules Evans. And I interviewed there, together with my colleague Nir Tadmor, 48 individuals that had challenging psychedelic experiences, and we did in-depth interviews with them. So we had a couple of themes that we wanted to investigate. So it was trauma, and we have a paper about this in scientific reports about recalled traumatic memories in psychedelic experiences, specifically sexual abuse. And we ask also questions about meditation, mindfulness, Buddhist perspective as a supportive mechanism post challenging psychedelic experiences, and psychotherapy. So we wanted to understand if psychotherapy was a supportive intervention after a challenging psychedelic experience. And there is, when I say psychotherapy, there is a lot of psychotherapies. There is chemotherapy, CBT, psychodynamic, ACT, blah, 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 blah. We saw that for 40% from our cohort, psychotherapy was truly beneficial to their integration and post-challenging psychedelic difficulties. For 57%, it wasn't the right thing, and we want to understand why. So the paper is focusing, and the talk in ICPR is focusing on what is not working. So it's actually coming to the same thing that we did with the Nova Rave survivors. I took what we understood from this study, and I kind of built our course that we taught that's called Psychedelic-Informed Psychotherapy. We started to teach that a month after the October 7 event. And one theme that really jumped from the interviews was I didn't have a psychedelic-informed therapist. So I kind of copy-pasted from this study from 2022 to the work that we did on 2023. And as I mentioned before, to be a psychedelic-informed therapist is a lot of things, but it's basically holding a non-judgmental and compassionate and phenomenological curiosity towards the experience of the person that entering your clinic. There is no room for pathologization. There is no room for a lot of interpretations, psychodynamic, psychoanalysis interpretations. We need to give space to the weird, spiritual, mystical experience and support the meaning-making process of the individual, because those experiences are kind of core experiences to our self-making processes for a lot of individuals. And if we're not doing this process in a supportive environment, we can become really pushing some meaningful experiences away from us and stay in this void kind of we're trying to reach somewhere, but the environment is not supportive. This is why there is also withdrawal sometimes from society to very different places, to maybe sometimes dangerous individuals that help you in this process, but they are not really aware of how to do ethical work with clients, or they don't understand mental health properly as we sometimes do, people that got trained in formal trainings. So it's holding the stick from both ends, holding the phenomenology of a psychedelic experience and ethical responsibility of a psychologist, a psychiatrist, social worker, etc., etc.
Beautiful. And that emphasizes particularly the interdisciplinary nature of the competencies that we need to be able to hold space or support people, be open enough to know ourselves enough. Thank you, Guy. This is a beautiful taste of you and your work, and really looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Just before we say shalom, let people know, where they can find your information. We'll include it as well in the links, but where can they find out more about you and your work?
www.guysimon.com/English, or without a slash, it will take you to the Hebrew website if you speak this language. I'm based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. This is where I'm doing my clinical and academic work through online, Zoom, but also in person in my private practice here. You can also go to Google Scholar and type my name, and you will see my published articles. And it's updated every month because I'm a workaholic. That's my drug of choice, work.
Me too. Yeah, workaholic. All right, keep up the good work, Guy. Everyone who's been watching and sees the recording, thank you. Stay well, and blessings for the journey. Take care.